Wanadhani ya bongo lala.
Tumejamu sijifanye uja notice.
Wanadhani ya bongo lala.
Tumejamu sijifanye uja notice.
Wambie punde imechoka sana.
Tumejamu sijifanye uja notice.
Wambie punde imechoka sana.
Tumejamu sijifanye uja notice.
Get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready.
So guys, I don't know if you saw, but there was this Vietnam investor who visited the country, yeah? Na akaketi na must go, na obviously kulikuwa na mipango ya kukopa hapa na pale, but from that visit, this guy really injected. Oh my goodness. Guy, I don't know if you saw the statement alitoa after the visit. Now we will just highlight tutasoma hapa na pale vitu kidogo kidogo tu zenye ziko na uzito, yeah? So the heading was, why Africa waits while Asia builds. Why we wait while they, oh my God. Wow. And he says, I met with Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and President William Ruto. That was that. And he says how they spoke with energy about Kenya's future, blah, blah, blah. But he said, but behind the polished language. Yani, this guy had one sit down with a man, and he already knew this guy has polished language. And there is no serious execution culture. Wanaongea tu. Lakini sasa, it's easier said than done, literally. As in, with this government, easier said than tusonge tuendelee. And he said that Kenya's real problem is not lack of money or talent. So we have the money and we have the talents. They're not the problem. It is the absence of long-term vision. Yani, the government we have now, wanaona hapa, as in tomorrow, nambali kabisa naona ni 2027. And the dominance of short-term gain. Ya maana mmempe miaka 5, anataka hiyo miaka 5 akule. Anyway, hebu niambieni kama mnataka part 2 kwa sababu this statement. Wewe. And this is an investor from outside. Aliongelea mpaka stima. Akisema venye tu huku mvua ikinyesha hivi, KPLC washakuja kununua stima yao. Na hii ndio nchi mnataka investors wakuje wa invest. Anyway, must go.
And yes, a whole Vietnam investor injected properly, because now the incompetence of this government has even made both foreign and local investors become activists in this country. He raised very pertinent issues, one of them being the cost of power and the instability of power in this country. He compared data in regards to population vis-a-vis power in both here in Kenya and Vietnam, and you could see the difference. And he even said, the government, as much as it's constructing many economic zones, it makes no sense if it cannot supply stable and adequate power. I mean, we saw our own president talking in a podium and power just decided to go off. I mean, how ridiculous is it? He also raised the issue of tourism. He said he had booked in advance to access the national park, but upon getting there, he had to wait a whole 90 minutes to access the park. Again, because the government has decided all payments should be paid through one system. And the last thing he touched about is a whole national capital city closing at 9 p.m.
Usikisa mazee, uko hivyo pande za Vietnam kuna president wa gas anaitwa Chau. Sasa huyu Chau alifanya meeting na amri jeshi pamoja na Mudavadi, na after vile alimaliza kufanya hiyo meeting alikuwa anasema that hawa ni viongozi wenye hawana long term vision, na pia hakuna serious execution kwa any mradi yoyote yenye wamepanga wakasema that hii watafanya. Now zile mradi zenye amri jeshi pamoja na Mudavadi walikuwa wanaambia huyu Chau, ukumbuke ni gas president, walikuwa wanamwambia watafanya ama wanaweza taka kufanya hapa hivi Kenya ni housing, infrastructure, mambo ya investment pamoja pia na mambo ya kuleta mambo ya stima. Lakini sasa Chau anasema that ile shida yenye huku hivi mazee pande ya Afrika na pia Kenya si ati hakuna maganji ama si ati hakuna talents za watu wenye wanaweza fanya hizo vitu, ni ati systems zetu ni mbaya, na ni mbaya kabisa vile hazifanyangi, whereby leaders wanaongeanga vitu kubwa lakini hakuna kitu wanafanya. For example, anasema kama hii party ya stima, usikisa huyu Chau anashindwa kuelewa ni aje huko hivyo Vietnam population ni 100 million, lakini supply ya power ni over 70 gigawatts. Lakini huku hivi Kenya tuko say 50m, lakini supply ya power ni 4 gigawatts. Yani sijui kuna get. So Chau kitu alikuwa anamaanisha hapa ni kama Kenya supply yetu ingekuwa between 30 to 40 ama tuseme 30 to 50 tungekuwa place nyingine poa, because anasema hakuna vile investor anaweza kuja kuweka biashara yake Kenya mahali penye stima zinapotea, zinawaka, zinazimika, sijui kuna nipata maze, yani ziko aziyuko hiyo design. Na bado alikuwa anasema that hiyo mradi yenye kina Amri Jeshi walimwambia housing ni mradi poa, lakini pia inaweza kosa ku attract investors kwa sababu ya corruption. Okay, achana hiyo part ya corruption, petty corruption. Unajua sasa kuna corruption alafu kuna hizi corruption zingine za upuuzi. Unashangaa sasa mpaka hapa hivi nini mnatoa. Na ndio maana Ubazenga akamalizia kusema that ile barrier inafanya Afrika hakuna maendeleo. Mazeni ati kuna mental, like sijui tuko na viongozi wenye wako mental ama namna gani. Juu anasema Afrika iko na potential nyingine big. Afrika tukiweza pata viongozi tu wale wenye wako na mindset shift, tunaweza kuwa continent nyingine noma sana. So sijui nyinyi mnafilaje, but pia mazee unajua hizi countries zingine zikishaanza kutuona hivi ni ngori. Jujue president wetu dunia mzima anajulikana kama mtu mwenye ako na persuasive skills, kama mtu mwenye ni eloquent kuruka, like mkianza kubongana anaweza kuchanganya, na bado ikikam kwa skills zake za oratory. Like unakumbuka ile day fulani Amri Jeshi alipiganga speech huko hivyo pande ya France, kwa ile uwanja fulani ilikuwa big, yani mpaka wazungu wamekaa hivi wanashangaa, huyu jamaa ametoka Afrika, nani huyu mazee mwenye anazoza. So nyinyi mnafeel aje kuhusu huyu Chau? Ametuingililia sana ama anasema ukweli?
I want us to read with you here what President at Vietnam Gas and Energy said about Africa by visiting Kenya. He said, why Africa awaits while Asia builds a hard look at Kenya. He had visited Kenya the other day. I met with Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and President William Ruto in Nairobi. They spoke with energy about Kenya's future and investment. Tumeweka mikakati, tumepanga hawa vijana about investment, infrastructure, public housing. But behind the polished language was a painful truth. There is no serious execution culture. Behind hiyo uongo yote na tumeweka mikakati, tumepanga, kumbe yote ni ukora. Kenya's real problem is not lack of money. Shida ya Kenya si kukosa pesa or talent ama watu wa kufanya kazi. It's the absence of long-term vision and the dominance of short-term gain. Tulikuwa na vision 2030. Ni kukosa vision. Mtu anakuja tu tumeka kati, tumeka mipango, anaanza housing, sijui anaanza SHA, anaanza ni ndio tu wakule. Dominance of the short-term gain. Leaders talk big. Watu wanaongea kwa meza how they will do things, but system don't move. They wait for outsiders to bring business rather than build an environment for it. Wanangoja tu investors wakule makat 10%, but they cannot build an environment for business here in Kenya. That's why business in Kenya are running away to the other countries. The biggest indicator, electricity. Vietnam, 100 million people, over 70, I think he want to say, gigawatt of power. Kenya, 50 million people, only 4 gigawatt of power. 4. We have geothermal, we have hydro, we have solar, we have wind. We have everything to supply the rest of Africa with power, but we can't. This is not a side issue. It is the foundation of economic development. No investor will build a factory where the lights flicker every day. Hii Kenya saa hii mvua ipige mabati tu mara moja, pop stima zimeenda. Vietnam knew this. It built power generation before free trade zones, and now it's a global export hub. In Kenya, basic energy supply is unstable, and yet the government built fancy expressway, and we cannot even build for power something that we already have. Akina geothermal, akina hydro, akina wind, akina solar. We can supply, in fact, the rest of Africa with power. But we are ready to go for an expressway from Nairobi to Mombasa without an export industry to support it. Meanwhile, millions live in slums, huts with no accessible to utilities. Why do you think we are going for expressway? Because of the cut 10%. Utakula, nani atakula? Tourism is another missed opportunity. The other day I put a video for you here. I told you Kenya is a paradise. Shida, we cannot even tap such opportunities. Safari bookings require 90-minute check at park gate. Enda hapa Nairobi National Park, my friend, ukute ni gari 3, but utakaa hapo for 2 hours waiting uangaliliwe, kwa sababu watu wanangoja ka mistake uko nayo, ka mistake kidogo hapo hivyo ndio uachote. Even with the observations, after 9 p.m. everything closes. After 9 p.m. even in Nairobi, kila mtu kwao. There is nothing for visitors to experience or spend on beyond Masai Market that is essentially a souvenir stand. President Ruto wants to build public housing. Hii tunapiga kelele about hapa mnaona kama ni joke. But investors are scared off by petty corruption. Because niliwaambia housing is pure corruption. Even mnasikia affordable houses, it's pure corruption. Even in Kenya you cannot tell who is doing that job. Unasikia tu nyumba zinajengwa. That is now outsider telling you. And legal instability. There are no credible incentives, no serious risk guarantees. In short, no real initiative to make it happen. Compare this to Vietnam or Singapore. Leaders are up to 5 a.m. working on execution, not speeches. Kenya president ako juu ya gari. Kwanza Kenya rasi speeches ni campaign. Power supply is constant in those countries. Policies are constant and are driven. Incentive aligned with performance. Africa does not lack potential. It lacks a mindset shift. Leadership must stop performing for the next donor visit or summit. Yani wa Kenya president anaweza kaa hivi akingoja the next donor summit itakuwa lini tuombe pesa. It must build system that attract local and global investment. Reward builders and guarantee follow through. The global window is closing. Asia is not waiting. If Kenya and much of Africa want a real economic future, they must turn off the microphone and turn on the power. Can Ruto turn off the microphone? Can he stop the campaign? So acha atoke hiyo China na 130 billion yenye ameenda kuchukua. Zote zitaishia kwa campaign. Zote. That is why I'm telling you, we must change all this narrative 2027. Most of these leaders unasikia wakisema oh tutafuata njia to as young people tufagie wote waende nyumbani. Wote. It doesn't matter they are our kingpins or something. They are our problem.
Good morning. All right. This is what is happening in the world of business with our president. So it happens that the Vietnamese gas president met President William Ruto and the Prime Cabinet Minister Musalia Mudavadi. This is what he had to say about especially Kenya and Africa as regarding development. His name is Chau. Chau argued that the problem in Kenya and much of Africa was not a lack of money or talent, all right? Rather, it lacks bold, long-term vision and serious execution culture that continues to stall Africa's development. So that's our problem. We do not have long-term plans. We are very short-term. So unakuta Ruto is only working to achieve something in 5 years, instead of working on a long-term plan, which will continue to be implemented by different leaderships, such that we don't have to begin all over again whenever there is a regime change. Rather, let it stay like a company where there is continuous system. But what happens in Africa? African leaders believe they are the ones who are supposed to implement those changes, and therefore they don't develop long-term plans because they just want to eat and make as much money as possible. That's the whole reason. Because you cannot have a short-term plan and that's why you find that most of the companies that will be given those long-term projects, they are meant to be long-term, but they end up being short-term because these guys are forming their own companies and giving their own companies businesses. I don't know whether you've read about this company, which was in debt, in 2023. But they were given a 2-point-something billion affordable housing in I think in Noitoktok. So you wonder if these people really were serious in what they were doing. Unless there is another explanation, but you cannot be unable to pay your debt as a contractor, and especially building and then you're given $1 billion or $2 billion, $3 billion worth of contract. Anyway, the guy continued to say that he was speaking immediately after meeting the President William Ruto and also Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi. I met with Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and President William Ruto in Nairobi. They spoke with energy about Kenya's future, investment, infrastructure, public housing. Okay, but behind the polished language, this is someone speaking from outside. Behind the polished language was a painful truth. There is no serious execution culture. They are very good in laying out the plan, but they don't have a clue how they are going to achieve it. Leaders talk big, but systems don't move. They wait for outsiders to bring business rather than build an environment for it. Oh Lord. He used the electricity supply as a key indicator to draw comparisons between Kenya and his home country, Vietnam, claiming that the government only performed when preparing for the next donor visit or summit. So Ruto wanga anapanga vitu vile zitafanyika akijua kuna mtu anakuja kufinance ama kuna summit inafanyika, kuna mkutano inafanyika mahali, ndio anajipanga. Vietnam, 100 million people, over 7 GW of power. Kenya, 50 million people, only 4 GW. Can you imagine? We are supposed to be at 35, at least half of them. This is not side issue. It's the foundation of economic development. No investor will build a factory where the lights flicker every day. Chau was especially critical of Kenya's infrastructure priorities, citing the Nairobi-Mombasa Expressway as a flashy but disconnected investment. He also pointed to Kenya's underwhelming tourism experience as another missed opportunity. Safari bookings require 90-minute check-ins at park gates, even with the reservations. After 9 p.m., everything closes. There is nothing for visitors to experience or spend on beyond a Maasai market that is essentially a souvenir stand. On housing, Chau noted that President Ruto plans for public housing were unlikely to attract serious investors due to petty corruption and legal instability. There are no credible incentives, no serious risk guarantees. In short, no real initiatives to make it happen. He contrasted this with Asia's approach, where leaders are more focused on delivery than display. For Chau, the real barrier to Africa's growth is not external, it's mental. Africa doesn't lack potential, it lacks mindset shift. Leadership must stop performing for the next donor, visit, or summit. It must build systems that attract local and global investment, reward builders, and guarantee follow-through. In conclusion, Chau appealed to grassroots leaders to take initiative in solving energy problems, promising support for solar-based microgrids. If you are ready to take the first step toward a solar energy project rooted in your local realities, I promise I will be there with you, he said. I will bring solar panels and energy storage systems to help build microgrids, small self-sufficient sources of power that don't depend on distant, complicated government programs. He added, let's work together and show what's possible when compassion, commitment, and community lead the way. His parting shot was, the global window is closing. Asia isn't waiting. If Kenya and much of Africa want a real economic future, they must turn off the microphone and turn on the power. Ruto, turn off the microphone and turn on the power. That's the message. But are you listening? You don't hear, you don't listen. All you're interested in is to make more money. That is the curse of Kenya and indeed Africa.
Na vitu zina happen in country ikifika 2027 na uko 18 plus tukupate bila kura. Ai! Utatuambia unaishi wapi? Utatuambia unataka nani apeleke Ruto nyumbani?
Ruto tunataka kwanza kupunguza tamu yake kama ingewezekana. Kama ingewezekana hii mwaka ingeisha kama wewe mtu amekaa kwa hiyo kiti. Aende nyumbani, kazi imemshinda.
You like me, you like me. Why them a fight me, fight me, fight me. You like me, you like me. Chewing a bone with a bitey, bitey. We don't trust them, we don't trust them even if we bust them. We don't trust them, we don't trust them, stay far, not touch them. We don't trust them, we don't trust them, hope their man a suck them. Informer me say you must them.